So the improv thing, you're even going to do improv on this subject. Is that right, Mr. Dunn? Are you sure that's a sensible course of action for your PR PR office here? For the Manchurian candidates PR office, we're just a little concerned about you sort of winging it through this issue, which is such a trigger central issue and a very offensive issue for just everybody involved. There's absolutely nothing probably in this that you're going to discuss. It's going to be anything other than extremely offensive and terrifying and uncomfortable. And it's something between creepy and weird and inappropriate. And all these kind of things all at the same time. What are you going to do about that? What do you think, mate? Huh? Fluff Puff here and we're just both males, right? So he's the most male. He's the most male, masculine, perfect male, masculine being I've ever come across in my entire life. He just does eating, sleeping, and sort of occasionally being quite very affectionate with just random objects. And myself, he's obviously had a medical procedure to make him more tolerable in a domestic environment. We can't do that to boys, I'm afraid, girls. I know there's a lot out there campaigning for that. But like they're really, I hope like to get through this thing as best I can with all my flaws, and there's a real history, really toxic history here in my life, and I can only really bring to these issues good intent and hope that my experiences will not cloud my judgment too badly. And I've put together a bunch of proposals here. And I think the thing about in the defense of the improv and the sort of semi silly nature of this, I don't really know another way through it, folks. So yeah, if you're not open minded enough to accept me with my good intent of wanting to make the world better and resolve a great deal of conflict like between gender and on the subject of gender and around the gender, the culture wars, like my wish would be to try and take the heat out of all of it and try and get us all to unite really in a way because we've got very very dark forces taking over politics. And I have called this bandwagon the new age for a lot of reasons. The word nova and the new age apply deeply into my life in ways that not for everybody in the dear audience I can fully disclose, nor would I need to. Really, it doesn't really matter. The point is, this is the perfect title, New Ageism. I hope to inspire a sense of that kind of, maybe not in the Russell Brand era, but the post Russell Brand era of what could be heteronormative kind of wokeness, right? I can only be who I am. I'm a guy. I'm 40 this year, year of production. It's the year of 40. So the age of men that we're in with this young buck of us barely a stag, a sort of stag with some still fluffy bits around the edges and that. The age of 40 is here telling the world how to do it. Is that right? I know it's like the mansplain warning here. I can't do any more warning you about the fact that I am a very limited male, heteronormative male from a quite privileged, even though a working class in my context, background for sure, and with some interesting aspects that I don't want to disclose to, with it in a way that causes any harm or discomfort to any loved ones or any friends or anything like that. So no disclosures of any names or no disclosure, any anecdotes. Details are changed enough. I hope to protect anybody, but I also feel like it'd just be great to bring some of my experiences with positive, kind wishes for the world and solidarity for the entire kind of woke, semi woke, post woke, everything other than anti wokeness, really. If somebody's really triggered by wokeness, if someone is like out to do a war on wokeness, maybe you're a member of a faith or a church or something like that, something fairly devout or conservative, I'd probably advise against this material. Okay. And I'd probably just say, like, unless you really want to be at war with me, the producer of this, the thinker behind all this, um, probably just don't watch it then. Eh? Probably just chill out. Probably just go, just relax. What does it matter? You've made your mind up about the world, haven't you? You've made your mind up about how it is. You've made your mind up about men. You've made your mind up about women. You've made your mind up about anybody in between. And there's no really logical any basis or no real any humanistic thinking that could make our lives better. But instead, a state of permanent war and chucking your loved ones out and reacting in a hateful kind of religiosity way. Maybe that's your cup of tea. Maybe that is what you find superior to what I'm about to put forward in this material. And if so, good luck to you with that. My advice is probably like that war and conflict and fighting and trying to wipe out that which we don't tolerate is unwise. And that then wisdom, I think, is instead to be tolerant, tolerant, tolerant. And observe that all humans generally within each other, within ourselves, there's a oneness. And any kind of real sense of division, separateness, whether that be across a gender divide, sort of intermittent through genders and varieties of genders and whatever kind of divisions and hatred and contempt one might have, even just if it's a contempt for the bland vanillaness that I am as a basic is what I said earlier on today. I was just, oh my god, I was sort of so funny. Basic, absolutely so basic. One of the most basic men you've ever come across. He likes the basic stuff. His Instagram is an absolute horror show of women behaving in a sort of immature and depraved fashion. Even at your age, you should be ashamed. I mean, you should be ashamed of yourself. Aren't you ashamed of yourself? It's just absolutely horrible to have those desires about kind of, ugh, rumpy pumpy stuff, things like that. Well, mate, I can't. I mean, I just can't. I'm like cursed. I think that maybe it's a curse, brother. Do you not think that we're sort of we've done something horrible in a past life? And this is their like reprieve for it. You will spend all eternity like the hungry ghost, government days, hungry ghost, crawling around on your knees and your hands, begging for just to disappear up inside things and to just never really come out ever again and just like fall asleep there. That's the end of your journey. Really, just perish, and then just collapse on the floor in a heap and just decease and wither away like every other kind of male species. I don't know. I feel like I've got more to do, more to give, and more to get on into the world. And then I actually want to try and fight off the aging process with the Pilates style and be vibrant. And look at the colours here. Look, I think we've rambled enough on the introduction. I think we warned the audience enough and informed them about your sort of weirdness and your randomness and your absolutely basics. Hopefully, they won't be offended too badly when you fucking make a mess of this. And understanding, ultimately, mate, you know what I was saying to you earlier on. Mate, the way you said mate there. Let me try again. Wait. Forgive me. Look, I'm trying to be an independent politician. What that means is I'll just be myself and be authentic, and hopefully that'll win votes. The market seems to want authenticity. Well, buckle up. Thanks for listening. And, yes, basic warning, right? Thank you. Thank you for listening. Gender Justice Policy Proposals by Ian F. Dunn. Right. I don't think I'm going to say anything at all here, Mr. Dunn. I'm going to get you to explain what on earth, what are we looking at here exactly? What's going on here? Like, first of all, it says final warning, mature, decency, etc. Look, in order to have a discussion about gender justice, we all have to enter the safe space of trust and being able to discuss things and sort of point out some things that might be slightly offensive to one another, that might be slightly triggering to one another. I can only be as flawed and ignorant as my male white privilege westernized biases that I have, and just so all I can do is offer to the public. Remember that. Why am I doing this at all? Why would anyone do this madness? The point is to try and get elected, right, and win an election, and therefore make the changes that we need in order to make everybody's lives better. If we don't, if silly, trivial nonsense and weaponizable stuff is used to prevent me from winning my election and getting change across the final hurdle, so to speak, it will probably come in the departments like this, where there's sort of confusing blind spots, or there's things that I'm just not. I would hate to find out that I'm not woke enough. If anyone can find a more woke politician than me, I would like to be directed to that wokeness. Here, what have I done? I'm trying to think. Well, can I put in one page like enough kind of controversial figures? I'm not really sure if I managed it, but I did put some headscarves on some dudes, which is very controversial. I would hopefully that nobody in the Islamic faith, Muslim faith, would take offense to this. I'm just sort of trying to point out the sort of weirdness of what would it be like if men had to wear scarves, right? I don't mean to cause any offense to any religions, other than to say I really object to every single religion. I think that most and all religions are problematic in the gender conversation. So, excuse me, immediately what I would say here is, can we just be very clear about this video is going to be bold in its discursive nature. The objective is not to offend anyone. Certainly taking out hatred, projecting hatred onto anyone for any gender reason. Faith is a different faith, like targeting a group because of a race, or like, so the whole Jewish anti-Semitism thing. These are quite blurry issues I don't have answers to, other than to say directing hatred at a group because of who they are is unacceptable. But being hateful about something that someone else is doing is kind of normal human behavior. Like, really, you just don't let that hatred become your personality, nor do you take that hatred out on them. If anything, you listen into that and go, what is this trying to tell me? Why am I sort of triggered by this thing? Why am I made uncomfortable by this? Maybe there's something I need to learn about this. So there's a lady with a mustache there. That's kind of just for fun. There's a sort of lady church person here. There's a couple of girls doing like STEM jobs, because they're like getting them into the tech things, doing things unconventional stuff, and just people of different races, and kind of just being clear that
What I want, I want to have a world where this guy doesn't look very happy with his headscarf on, funnily enough. I want a world where everyone is tolerated and no one is targeted with hatred. People being targeted with hatred because of who they are is just completely unacceptable to me. I think that at this age, I feel more confident coming to politics with some clarity about some issues, which we'll discuss further on. But I just want to open with this kind of silly one. It's a key master final warning. Please don't be triggered and upset by what I'm going to say in this video. If you are, then I hope that is of a constructive and positive nature and not taken as an offensive attack upon anyone, which this certainly is not. All right. Thank you very much for listening. Cheers. Okay, moving on then. Next slide. Move out. Listen, I'll try to remember to tell you moving slide so that you can sort of listen to it podcast style and then, go about your business if it's rambling. You're going to try and keep this one a bit shorter though, aren't we, Mr. Dan? I don't want to be here all day. Right, fine. Let's move on. It's important. We're going to talk if we need to talk, all right? New age. Back to the new age. Right. So what if we're going to have a new age, Nova? No, that's Nova, right? No, well, Nova, Epoch Nova, New Age. That's the thing. That's just a comic book that I kind of like, I'm vaguely familiar with the character Nova. Anyway, it's like the flags are the main thing there, right? Flags, gender, the flags are still cool. The flags are not necessarily going to be all over my work, but they're kind of in my work in lots of places. And a little nod, I hope people will spot them. This page here, just to give a bit of terminology, clarify, double check things, which make sure that I have my right terminology. I'm not going to put my foot right in it on day one. Kind of most useful one here is liberty. Liberty definitions from Oxford Language Liberty. Number one, the state of being free within society from oppressive restrictions imposed by authority on one's way of life, behavior, or political views. The power or scope to act as one pleases. This is liberty. Liberty is like this. Justice is the quality of being fair and reasonable. LGBTQ, we know the lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and queer. So it's got having a bit of a dead moment getting through stuff. So sex and gender. This is why any little comedy takes the edge off things quite well, don't you think? I find anyway. So sex versus gender. This is one that getting these two separation of these things. So the different biological and physiological characteristics of males and females, such as reproductive organs, demonstrates hormones, etc. Right? So that would be sex. So like when you pick up a baby chick, they do a thing called sexing them, which is kind of appalling because they go, "Oh, this one's a girl," so we keep that one, and they go, "Oh, this one's a boy," and they put the boy in the mincer, straight in the mincer. Poof, gone. There you go. Sorted. So that's what the sex is. That's the way to remember that. You're welcome. Gender refers to the socially constructed characteristics of women and men. So gender to the socially constructed characteristics. So ideas about this is what a woman is like and this is what a man is like, such as norms, roles, and relationships of of and between groups of women and men. So that's curious, interesting. And then gender, as we've said already. So look, that's clear. We've just wanted to make sure that everyone's nice and clear about what we're talking to when we use these words. All right, let's move on. Oh, Madison's here. Salute you, Mr. Madison, fourth president of the United States. A fine man as well. Yes, well, here we go. Veritas non verba magistri. Truth, not the word of teachers. So he was a man, right, really into getting it right, yeah? Don't listen to other people and their rubbish. Make up your own mind. Anyway, so the church, who is the church? The teachers, Madison was about the church and state separation, is my understanding of him. He was a very big fan of that particular part of constitutional law, and so he's referenced here with great reverence. Me personally, my little quote, I'd like to build a wall too, yeah? One that is between the church and the state. Moving on. Hang on, I think you better clarify, Mr. Dunn. You've got that little weird God bit in your constitutional thingamajiggy. You mean the God bit in the democracy thing? Oh, yeah, right. No, I'll mention that, right? So the word of God to the candidate. So the only way that there is God, because we've had this discussion a few times, like spirituality versus religion, religiosity not being present in the Constitution here, but it being present actually not in the American Constitution either, which has caused great confusion at the moment. There are people who are stomping about in America saying they live in a Christian country and it's a Christian Christian fundamentalism they just say that's how things are. No. The truth is that your Constitution, the one that you worship and was made very cleverly by the founding fathers, to try and make sure that the church could not take over again, that religiosity and the madness of following the Bible teachings in a century where things are just changed so much that its relevance is not whatever. I am quite an anti-faith person in general. I generally try and live entirely in evidence-based conduct and so on, and morally logical, reasoned conduct also. So here, the logic and reason I'm trying to apply in this constitutional thinking, and it's just a bit of an experiment. People might think it's nuts, but I'm putting it forward as part of my brand as a politician, is to say, look, to me, I am the candidate. I represent the people, and therefore, what the people say is the word of God to me, right? So I don't have another higher power than the word of the people. The word of the people is the word of God, all right? Now, how I've worded that and explained that, it may get amended and whatever. This is January 2025. I've redrafted it 2 or 3 times, and it says at the moment, the word of God to this candidate shall only be spoken by the Democratic majority without ambivalence. So people voting en masse, expressing their opinion, and the way to the most moral answer, in my opinion, is to ask the most number of human beings that moral question, and you will get the most perfect moral answer at the end of it by listening to the most number of honest, truth telling, fair minded, well educated, liberated people. Okay? Moving on. Oh, now what's this thing here? Well, mate, it says girls can wear jeans and cut their hair short, wear shirts and boots because it's okay to be a boy. But for a boy to look like a girl is degrading because you think being a girl is degrading. So this line was used at the start of a famous and excellent Madonna track. What I've added here is that hating an entire gender, choosing to treat a person poorly or differently because of their gender on any occasion is sexism, as it would be for racially toxic assumptions. So people doing racism, for example, what I mean by that is, targeting people because of the race and nationality. I've just had an argument on Twitter about some bunch of people who think that it's totally legit to do this. It isn't. Okay, so when people say things like all men or all women, sometimes I fall into the trap of it too. Maybe we all fall into the trap of it, but we really need to avoid that becoming contempt and hatred, and just not do it as best we can. Just never try your best to make sure that you meet a new person, however diverse from you they may be, or how identical they may be to you. Because if one comes identically disguised as you and then chucks you under the bus, I mean, I'm sorry to break it to you, but wolves and sheep's clothing and all the rest of it. Look, don't judge books by covers. Very sensible, but this is grander than that. It says, do not think ill of all men and all women. Like the kind of hatred. This type of thinking is obsolete, and so is intolerance of those whose gender ID is a minority in the population. Now, that means specifically those whose gender, status and all that is in some sort of flux or some sort of ambiguity or some sort of non-binary status. I have loved ones like this in my life. I think that the reality is that we just cannot be treating people like this any different anymore. It has been historically tolerable for hatred to go on. It has been historically tolerable for this to be a source of fun and a joke. And I think that we really need to move beyond it. So gender justice here, straight up, is really a trans comment here. That from the trans debate, I don't have all the answers to that. I don't know why people would want to ask me all the answers to that. Who would care what I think anyway? The point is that what matters is what you think about who you are, and you get to become who you are without facing hatred and awful bile from hateful people, bullshit from people. I'm just going to make this a bit sweary ones. Well, why not? Don't want to put up with any bullshit from anyone because of what kind of bits you have, or what kind of bits you don't have, or how well your bits work or don't work, or what they do and what they don't do. Any ambiguity, confusion about these kind of things is completely absurd. People, all human beings, are very beautiful in general. Humans that are mistreated or humans that are diseased and dysfunctional do become disordered and unattractive and kind of a nightmare to deal with, become kind of hideous in their behavior and their attitudes and their thinking, become very ugly and distorted and warped. And we get these hateful fascists stomping around, miserable and unhappy. Miserable, unhappy, stomping around, hating. There is no need for this. This is redundant behavior. This is the behavior of a broken child, a broken monkey child. Like the broken monkey, just coming, welcome to my banter. I sometimes say things like justice monkey and broken monkey. Justice monkey is the part of you that rages at this kind of thing, that goes, how dare a person, just because they are different, be treated with hatred? How dare a person, because they happen to be a girl, treated horribly by lots of men, and because they're a man, treated horribly by lots of girls? It's completely, just fucking bullshit. It's all got to stop, hasn't it? So that's the justice monkey. The justice monkey is, and you go, "Rah!" Wants to beat your chest about how unacceptable inequality is, wants to rage about how unfair the gender pay gap is, wants to rage about how unfair women's health is, what a state the country is in inequality in these areas of gender. So Justice monkeys, no broken monkeys. Let's the broken ones will be triggered by this. That's okay. Try to, if you are a broken monkey, try to repair yourself and stop hating people because of any particular thing because of who they are. It's okay to hate people a little bit because of something they did, but you don't want to let that become part of who you are and become a part of your attitudes in general about the world. Don't do that. Humans are not hateable. They're not hateable. No more hateable than dogs, cats, and chickens and birds and what the fuck tortoises, anything. Living things are all generally benign. They don't conduct evil things. They don't do things wrong and horrible like XL bully dogs are all. They're all wonderful as well, unless they're horribly treated, and then they turn out to be monsters and such. Now we do need to deal with some of the monsters, unfortunately. We do. We can't have them cutting about and treating people with hatred and all that. I just love this lyric, and I think it's one of the most beautiful things ever said about gender and all that. And it really, for me, for all the women who tend to be a bit more like men in general and find that life very, very difficult, solidarity to you. And all of the men, I think I kind of like myself. I don't really feel like I have you know, masculinity for me is a bit of a confusing feature. We can't. I can only bring myself to this discussion. It's as stable as a gender can be, I suppose. I've never certainly not had any doubt about it. But I don't like necessarily being the stereotypical misogynistic type man. Even though I was raised in the '90s and all that, and I've watched all that stuff on TV, and I have all these issues for sure. I'm very happy to be called out, and I don't mind being called out as well. And I'm quite happy to hear from people to say, "Dude, that you just said there, get that sorted out. Don't say that again. Change that." And I will do it. If I think that's legit, then please bring it to me. It's quite likely I'll be like, "Go, how dare you?" initially, but then maybe over a little time I'll take it on the chin and get better. Okay. So that's enough on that. Let's move on to the next slide, shall we? Yes, let's move on. We hear all bloody day talking about you and what you think. It's meant to be about other people, not just you. You know. Right. Thanks, mate. Thank you. Okay, moving on. This one is very quick and very indulgent. Okay, let me just tell you this one. Sinead O'Connor was one of the first feminists I can remember. Right. So if you think about me growing up in the '90s, as I was born in '84, so like it'd be like who is a like if you asked I don't know Ian and his sort of 12-year-old Ian at school and said to him, "Can you name a feminist, young Ian?" I'd go, "Oh, that's ridiculous," but but then I would go, "Probably that's Sinead O'Connor, right?" She kind of like upset the church and wound people up, and she had that great music. Because I mean, I remember her music, just beautiful music, the Irishness, Catholicism becoming a touchy subject in my house very early on, and I associate Sinead O'Connor as being someone who was kind of bothering the church, and I immediately found that cool and interesting because it's like, oh yeah, somebody's standing up against this nonsense they make you listen to in school or Sunday school at meetings and all that assembly doing the oh god, I hate all that. So Sinead O'Connor was like, oh, she hates all that too. She's cool. So what's the deal there? And then it was like, she's got no hair. She's got the short hair. That's weird. Like girls with the long hair, pretty girls with the long hair, and she's got the short hair. Doesn't seem to be bothered about whether we think she's pretty or not. Seems to just speak out and do her own thing. That's interesting. Very few women like that at the time. Very, very bold, excellent person, and a massive solidarity nod there to her, everybody around her, and all the rest of it. Great person, great impression upon me. And you need seeds like that, right? See, for all the girls that are struggling to get the point made with feminism, with young men and young boys and all the rest of it, like however you get through, you'll get through to the right ones. The ones that don't want to hear and cannot hear you, maybe you can't save them. That's okay. But this lady, she did a great job, did she? I'm not going to give too much time in this video, but just to mention her as probably my iconic feminist, earliest iconic feminist that I can think of off the top of my head. I was like, Sheena O'Connor. We lost her quite recently as well. So bravo to her for all her excellent work and life of, what would you say? Pushing back against the the grain, certainly, all right? Bravo. Moving on swiftly. Gender justice inspired brands. Oh, for God's sake, this is a sort of wokeism emergency. Is we having a wokeism psychological event, Ian? Is that what's happening? Look, well, maybe there's some stuff here. Look, it's a it's a holistic campaign I'm doing, man. Okay, politics is not silliness and Top Gear or some rubbish. Okay, it's actually how do you get stuff done? How do you get change over the line in a real effective way? So these are just a few that I thought I'd highlight that are kind of relevant to the gender discussion. Particularly, probably let's start with this one over here. So, gender, do we know what gender Nessie is? And I mean, we kind of say that Nessie's a. I think we all feel like Nessie is a girl. Speaking on behalf of Scotland, I think that most of Scotland suspects Nessie to be a female monster. However, the point is, it doesn't really matter, right? The point is that it's an absurd question for kids and young people, particularly kids, right? There's like The Nessie City Store. That's what what they is here for. They, right? Nessie's meant to be a they in this brand, guys. Okay, to make it kind of fun and interesting. Because like, I wanted the cargo bike brand that is it's the cargo bike brand, that one, right? It's to do with delivering essential goods, right? Like essentials and what I would call the necessities, right? So it became necessity. Now I hate the word necessity. I still can't fight the word necessity. Spell the word necessity. When I see the word necessity coming up in a sentence, I am literally evading trying to come up with any other word other than necessity. I can give you a list of words other than necessity that could approximately make necessity, right? So that I don't have to try and spell that goddamn word. I literally, it's just a complete mess of S's and C's and T's and what the hell. Not even going in there, man. No way. So what's it called? The Nasty City Store. Hey, for goodness sake. I mean, that's really weak, man. Look, it's a thing. Brands, you need a thing, okay? You just need a thing. This is probably one of my lower grade brands, I'll be honest. The Nessie City. So it's necessities. Nessie City. Is it? Remember that cargo bikes are largely going to be for urban areas, right? They're not going to huge range on them, so going long distances is not. It's going to be urban shopping, distribution, right? Urban retail by a cargo bike. Necessities on a cargo bike. Necessities. That makes sense. Anyway, and also these two little alien dudes that are for urban foragers. That's another thing we'll talk about. The urban foragers is a kind of recycling hybrid campaign, reboot of recycling projects, more to do with manufacturing stuff out of recycled goods right here in the UK. Now, the reason it's got a little one and a big one and a blue and it's kind of make it kind of whatever the gender doesn't matter. These little alien creatures, they're little mushrooms. I think they look like little Mario mushrooms, don't they? There's a reason they're mushrooms. Mushrooms to do with like mushrooms are kind of they grow from the decay, don't they? Right. So fungi. Trans color there, kind of trans nod. That's it, really. Just putting the color. Make sure the rainbow is present. Open source politics got a wee rainbow in it. Is to make sure that unfortunately we have to let certain people, certain cultures aware of the fact that there might be people within a certain culture, excuse me, who do not meet their classical, oh, this is a boy or a girl kind of split in gender, and this is we're all straight, and we'll have a gender reveal party, and we'll do all these lovely things that really enforce status quo genderism. I would like to just take out status quo genderism, not because excuse me, not because I'm drinking Coca Cola here while we're doing this. Forgive me all the gassy burpee. This is rather disgusting and absolutely appalling to put that on a podcast, quite frankly. The market wants authentic. It's going to get authentic. Look, I was watching Hassan Piker. People love Hassan. He was just eating his tea the other day. They're like, well, I'm just going to eat my dinner when I do mine next time. Just sit there. It's a busy life. I've got a lot of words to get through. So, meanwhile, just this thing, UFO. That's my campaign UFO, right? The whole cherry blossom tree is a memorial to my late mother who died under horrible circumstances in the NHS, and the OS Medical brand, open source medicine, total health liberty, guys. Why is it there? It's important. You need the open source politics. You need the open source medicine. Open source everything up. Open the world up. Open source gender. Open source gender. Could that be a thing? Does that work? That kind of sounds kind of like. I don't know if that's offensive or not. I don't know. Open source your gender. I mean, you could really be that means kind of be whatever kind of man or woman or anything in between that you'd quite like to be and just try to find happiness in this life. That is my advice. Okay, moving on. Yes, I'm being followed by a moon shadow. Let me just turn this one off. So this one, a nice one here. This is a moment seriousness from me regards to my mother's death. Kind of shared some details about this on my podcast. Let's not go too deep into it. Suffice to say, a life given to the NHS really in service, a life of sacrifice to national health, public health, and then ultimately to be harmed, greatly let down, and failed miserably at an end of life, extreme suffering scenario that just should never have occurred. And the do not harm consent culture is completely absent from medicine. I just want to make sure that the listener, the observer, understands what my attitudes on healthcare are. That public health is absolutely paramount. People should not go bankrupt because of disease. However, a system where the state is the pinch point and the controller of all healthcare is also unsatisfactory and causing great problems. So I'm proposing a different kind of medicine. There's extensive coverage of that on my channel. A lot of ranting and raving and howling at the moon about how bad healthcare really is in our country. And don't I don't want the listener, the audience, to go away in any doubt about the fact that consent is above all my highest priority. I am a libertarian, even one of the most liberal socialist people you'll meet in your life, I reckon. I am absolutely determined to have universal systems that create great liberty and freedom and maximum personal individual choice and success. I believe very much in community. There is a society. We must have good taxes. We must have robust military. We must have robust fire, police, robust courts, robust all of the things that we have now, which are currently in an absolute state of disgrace and shambles due to political failure. So, my candidacy, I really wish to try and throw myself into politics and see if I can make a dent in there. Healthcare is a big issue. In this context, for gender justice, it is essential that the current blockages and barriers and pinch points that are being put in place, I don't think they are legitimate. And my current position on that, none of these kind of barriers to people's choice should be in place. When it comes to children and the treatment of children, this is not something I can speak for because it is only down to the parent and the doctor. And I think it should be down to the parent and the doctor. And I don't think that politics should be in there intervening in anything that's going on at all in the clinic. Okay? Okay, point made. Let's move on, shall we? Okay, this one here. This is a cute one. Look, this is for all the family and little cuddle creature, little capybara type person. Look at that. That's lovely. Capybaras. Go on, tell us about that. Why is that relevant to the gender banter? For goodness sake, we're talking about this again, are we? Look, we've not talked about this one. I don't think I've really talked about this one much. Capybaras. Listen, I've only mentioned it in passing. Look, the point is, I did some time as a volunteer listener for a certain major UK charity. Anti-suicide measures are the main objective. I don't like to necessarily name them. I don't have any reason why not to. I just like to besmirch their good name with my filthy, awful name. In other words, there's no point in me being a controversial politician and then trying to expect that mainstream assets will whatever, tap me on the shoulder. My point would be that don't blame anything I'm attached to. Do you know what I mean? Like, isn't this the most liberal thing in the world to make sure you're held responsible for what you did and other people are not held responsible for what you did and other people are not being blamed for stuff that isn't your fault, okay? Now, with the happy bars, I'll be honest, it's about meeting a huge demand in the market that is not being met for low cost, straightforward, emotional cognitive health services, right? There are absurd clinical processes and barriers, whether it be the psychiatric kind of conduct of clinicians, the way that doctors and clinicians treat people is so dehumanizing that it is an actual hazard to your mental health. If you have a gender confusion, if you have any kind of ambiguities in your life that are sort of out with the mainstream, if you try and sit and talk to most members of our NHS, particularly clinical, more so than care, obviously, more the clinical than the care staff, not so much the clinical staff, are generally very posh, pampered, privileged people, middle-class people. In Edinburgh, the main problem, you'll probably never, ever, ever have a doctor who's from Edinburgh. Most of them will be from far down south or come from very privileged families overseas because Edinburgh is like that. So what we have in Edinburgh is a very severe problem of what I'm describing, class warfare going on in our healthcare sectors. There is basically a demand, a huge demand, which this charity, which I'm familiar with, is not able to cope with or meet on its own. And so with the happy bars, I would like to try and do a couple of things. Job creation, right? I mean, really, this is not, I don't know that I love the charity. I think the charity they're doing is amazing. I'd like to try and reinforce them massively if I'm ever getting anywhere near spending power for the government. But also, that demand that's there is taking the core principles of that particular charity and transplanting them into something that does a bit of job creation as well and creates a bit of a market offering, a service that is paid where people have a kind of I imagine a happy bara, quote, 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 because knowing enough about marketing and regulations and all the rest of it, as long as you call this happy bars, there's pretty much almost calling it something different from, in other words, I don't want doctors and clinicians in this at all. We just want volunteers and humans treating other humans like humans. Happy bars are non-dehumanizers, don't use clinical thinking, and they'll use emotional responding and be there cognitively for people going through great strife, particularly in this kind of gender context that we're discussing, where there is a very, very high rate of loss to suicide. Do you understand? So this is to meet that specific need. All right. Well, let's move on. That's a good one. Let's move on now. Right. Well, that's typically serious of you. Thanks very much, Tory Manchurian person. It's just the for those of us with chronic challenges who have actually gone from being a dude on a bike doing the length of the country to being a guy being told, yes, I can see that you're training for marathons and I can see that you're cycling the length of the country. I can see that you're like a buff unit of fitness and such, but actually you're so chronically ill that you're going to stay like this forever. And although we don't know our own arse from our elbow, anatomically speaking, just through osmosis and looking at you and talking to you, I've decided that your healthcare and your whole life is doomed to chronic disease. And I'll give you this diagnosis. So good luck, sunshine. And I'll quote, you just need to get used to your new quality of life. Your new quality of life. Get used to it, son. People with this don't get better. Don't even try. Give up on your physio. Give up on your Pilates. This is what a clinical urological doctor person paid an absolute fortune told me. I'll never get tired of proving you wrong. Never, never. I've heard this one. This is the one where you did the triathlon that year after getting told you were doomed forever, right? Yeah, very good, very good. Okay, so the pelvic pain thing, that's what I mean. I remember this. It's to do with you had a dodgy diagnosis, right, from urological people, clinical people, again, bringing the doctors back onto this sort of political discussion. But why is this relevant? Aren't you sort of stretching the relevance a little bit here? Well, I think maybe, yeah. It's just to sort of quickly point out what I've learned from working with pelvic health and people struggling with chronic pain in the back or pelvis or pelvic organs even are causing some challenges as people go through day-to-day life, just having basic functional problems, um, resulting from issues to do with gender. It's very important that we understand that people will have had medical influence, right, which governs their quality of life dependent on their gender, right? So, in other words, most of the time, if you're working in movement in this field with pelvic health, I came across lots and lots of people who were struggling with gender based kind of confusions and issues, um, who also struggled with pelvic pain, chronic pain, and discomfort and dysfunction. I don't like some of these words are a bit clinical. Do you know what I mean? People having trouble with how their bits work and stuff, right? So these kind of things, depending on what gender you are and how badly they affect you and all that. But the pelvic health coaching that I do is applicable to all genders, right? So the interesting thing is that the way to resolve a lot of problems in the field of pelvic health and pelvic pain, it tends to be that with chronic pain, and I mean, this is sort of anecdotal, but do you know what? It's not. It's not anecdotal at all. This is definitely evidence based to say that most, and I would argue that this might be quite a triggering thing to say, but I hope that a lot of women will listen to me, and even like men going through procedures, not just men as well. It's if you are suffering from chronic pelvic pain of pelvic pain or pelvic disorder of any kind, it's quite likely that there will be some form of wounding on a holistic level. I want to use the wounding term here, the mother wound or the father wound or the parenting wounds are basically wounds that have maybe occurred in early childhood. Sometimes these might be violations of liberty in terms of you may have been target of sexual abuse in childhood, right? And you can see here, this is why I have Epoch Nova in the Constitution that I'm putting forward protections for childhood liberty. So just to mention that childhood is the true libertarian's highest priority. Harming liberty or of parent or child during childhood is a violation of sacred loving bond we not do to any other mammal. This these types of injuries cause pelvic pain and dysfunction later in life. Now, this is how can I prove that to you? I mean, there's probably enough data there to establish that. It's sort of anecdotal, I guess. I'm just giving you holistic wisdom about the body and the human body. Humans cannot be healthy and have healthy sex lives and have healthy relationships and have healthy bonding if their childhood bonding has been disrupted or hurt or injured in some way. So when people are doing violate the liberty of children or who violate the rights of children, this could just be to self-identify which gender they are or what their sexual preferences are, or you know, I'm trying to think of a better example. I mean, really, just the most classic example is just being interfered with, usually by family members or whatever church people, people you've been exposed to, having access to children and then doing harm to children is a very common, sad to say, problem in our world, and its association with pelvic pain. So, child liberty protected constitutionally. Pelvic pain mentioned here regards gender and gender justice, that there is a great gender injustice. The great, vast amount of pelvic pain will be being suffered by women. Okay. I happen to be one of the poor men that was lucked out enough to get a kind of experience of having some pelvic pain and pelvic dysfunction, some neurological issues that I had to repair through holistic health. And doing so, I found myself in fascinating places, like of going from a very male working environment to a very female working environment and things like that, right? And I've now got 10, 12 years behind me working with a vast majority female client base. Vast majority, calm down, 60%. I would say it's like a 60, maybe 70, but like 60%, let's say, comfortably female audience for my business, my Pilates. And I have learned, watching, listening, discussing. Clients have been very open and shared a great deal with me, and hopefully that wisdom and knowledge, and usually horrendous experiences, will lead to some wisdom going forward. I guess the point is, this is in here just to remind the viewer, the audience, that you might be going through stuff and challenges in this field of gender, in this field of your gender identity, or coping with other genders, or how you treat other genders, particularly if you are doing pathological things like misogyny or hatred of men and whatnot. If you have these issues, they may well have their origin. I think almost certainly it's very hard to say, oh, it's definitely because of that, but because the reality is there doesn't seem to be another way that such problems can manifest. Do you know what I mean? There seems to be a very clear causal link between interference in childhood development and the cause of prolonged difficulty, confusion, and problems, sexual dysfunction, gender dysfunction, all these kind of things, pelvic dysfunction, pelvic pain, um, bowel and bladder disorders. Things can be expressed in these ways if childhood liberty has been violated. And when I'm saying childhood liberty violations in this constitution, the reader can now know for sure we're definitely talking about actively protecting children from predators. And this is like our sacred duty. This is the most important thing that any libertarian can be doing, is making sure that kids start in life is protected. There is no greater, if you ask me, role of society. So Epoch Nova, as a post-gender constitution, seeks to preserve the liberty of all in the community. All right, for our health, our well-being, not just because it's cool and it sounds cool, but because it genuinely is the basis of all human life and dignity and respect. People who don't respect childhood liberty, people who don't let children become themselves to figure out who they are, people who force their attitudes onto their children are child abusers, in my opinion. There is very few things you can do more abusive than force children. Maybe that would be like, the kind of reassignment stuff, or more, what do they call it? Pray away the gay stuff, that all these kind of things that are done. These are violations of childhood liberty and cause great harm. So let's move on to the next slides. It's going to get more and more serious now going forward. Thanks for listening, dear listener. Cheers. Okay, we're in some kind of Hammer horror movie apparently at the moment. Is that where we are? Sure, mate, you're not wrong, right? Because this is the darkness that I needed to bring into this subject, and a little bit. I wanted to kind of evoke some of that with this imagery, and I wanted to also, taking lead from Sinead O'Connor, really inspiration from Sinead O'Connor, to say we really need to have these ideas revolving around sort of antagonistic ideas about religion and the church. Okay, so this here, let me introduce you to the Magdalene Act. So the Magdalene Act is an idea I came up with because I wanted to have a profound and bold piece of legislation which is going to do more to elevate women's liberty and the security of women's rights, um, in this country than I think ever before. I think the Magdalene Act, I want to try and create an act or a way of legislating, at least a goal, to elevate women's liberty that could be applicable in many countries. Okay, so the name Magdalene we took from, beautiful name, took it from, the obviously it's a biblical name, and it's referencing the whole Da Vinci Code movement, the whole thing about where are women in the church? Why is women's place in the church such a sore subject? Well, because they basically have no place in the church, right? Women's place in the church is a second class citizenship. I think it is extremely difficult to expect that women will enjoy freedom and liberty and a full quality of citizen lifestyle that men do when there are cultures of religion being practiced. Religion ought not be anywhere near education. Schools that teach religion, I would abolish them because of this. Any faith school I would abolish because of this. Religion presents, and we'll go deeper into this as we get into the Pink Panther world, depends how triggered and ragey and ranty I get. But, dear listener, you must understand that women's liberty is pretty much incompatible with the church. The church is designed, I would argue, specifically for the removal of women's liberty. And the key character in the Bibles, the Bibles, are people such as Mary herself, so mother, Jesus' mother, apparently, was non-consensually impregnated. Is that right? By the Holy Ghost or some shit, right? I mean, it's look. I don't want to be offensive, other than to say to you, this in and of itself is offensive to me. The idea that you think that women should have their liberty taken from them and that they should experience a forced pregnancy, such as this, and weird things to do with who is the dad. The God is the dad. There's a virgin. She's a virginal person who's pregnant, right? Look, the whole subject is absurd. The whole subject is like it really is, I think, the key handle by which to defeat the power of religion in politics, the power that a lot of religion has over the lives of women, bothers me insanely. I hate that it is resurgent in this era. When I was a kid, I thought, oh, great, we're on our way to really more and more and more enlightenment. And forgive me, ladies and girls, but this statement here, I would like to try and weaponize this statement in a way that profoundly is a slap across the face of every religious and sane person who thinks that things, institutions such as marriage are equitable, institutions such as no divorce marriages are equitable, reasonable. The whole system of women's subjugation, if that's the correct word there, second class citizenship must end in my lifetime. I am absolutely disgusted by it. I can't tolerate the church anymore in politics. Okay, I tolerate the church doing their stupid bullshit, having your fucking mega churches, and all your fanning around. But listen, children are not safe anywhere near religious people. Religious people are a hazard to all children everywhere. Religious people are a hazard to all women everywhere. I will not be confused about this. You can tell me how wrong I am, but then I'll have to point to why are we having to protect women's clinics from people protesting and harassing women going in for their reproductive liberties for anything really. So I don't need any more evidence about this. My mind is made up, and this is the proposal. The proposal is to say the Magdalene Act. This is really simple, and just straight around the world, as far as I'm concerned, I don't see why this could not be a very good transferable, again, asset for the feminist movement, I would hope, is to compare rape today, the abundance of rape, to witch burning. Witch burning is a murder, obviously. It's a sort of group collective lunacy, decide that a person to target a woman and dehumanize her, turn her into a beast-like thing in their mind, and then murder and kill that person politically. It doesn't happen anymore, does it? Right? And people go, how are you going to abolish all rape? Because this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to get a world where there are no rapes. We're trying to get a world where there are no babies born of rape ever. There are no children in the world who are undesirable to both parents. This is not a human being that needs to exist, I'm afraid. I honestly think that the religions are kind of comfortable with rape. There's a strategy of are they comfortable with rape or not? And girls, young men, wise, enlightened people of the modern age who are not barbarian medieval fuckwits. You need to just very quickly clarify with the person what are your attitudes on rape. And if you get something like what I got from a religious person when I was saying, sorry, I need to come up with a law that will just abolish rape because I have loved ones who are vulnerable and I'm sick to death of these pathetic beta males forcing themselves upon women who do not want them. Nothing makes me more angry. Nothing makes me more uncomfortable. Nothing disturbs me more than liberty violations. It just makes my blood fucking boil. The idea that this could happen to loved ones of mine or has happened to girls that I love or girls from my life in the past or boys in my life doesn't really matter. Anyone having any sexual assault violation type stuff, non consensual stuff, we can abolish it. We can abolish it. We will abolish it. That's what this legislation will do. This legislation is not complete until that takes place. The mission of the Magdalene Act is incomplete if there are still rapes going on at all until rape today is the way witch burning is. Today, the work of the Magdalene Act will be incomplete. And it will take draconian measures. It will take policing. It will take competent courts. It will take competent politicians. It will take competent institutions all over the place which currently do not have. And I'm not aware that the upheaval is not significant, girls. But what I'm telling you is, unless you have a specific goal in mind, you're never going to get there. So this is the specific goal to have. Any non-consensual sexual acts will be as common as witch burning. It just does not happen anymore. And when you say to people, we will make it like that, they say, well, how on earth are you going to do that? Would you say, well, the same way that we did with the witch burning? The same exact way. Do you remember how in the past there was a time when witches were being burned, and then after some action was taken, there's now this time where there no witches are being burned. There's almost no such thing. Why? Because we changed and we evolved and we grew. Now, how exactly we do that is up for debate. And I'm here for, there are lots of great campaigns on the internet. You don't need all the answers from me. But the point is, politically, what kind of politician do you want to vote for? Well, I would want to make sure that this Magdalene Act is one of the premier things you have to really tick the box to become an open source politician, right? You know, in my book, you have to be completely anti rape in order to be a new age politician. I don't see how I can tolerate another politician who would not back this legislation. Is that clear? Well, very much. I think so. I think we should move on. You're just rabbiting on forever. Got a long thing here. Right. Okay. Right. Let's move on. Heaven and earth must be moved. Moving heaven and earth. You ever hear that? What did we do to get you, madam? The wedding cake didn't arrive, and the bridegroom, we lost him in a party the other night, and then the wedding guests, their airplane got diverted to Iceland, and then everything went on. And it's like, well, how on earth? But we still managed to have a good wedding. How did you manage to pull the wedding together? Well, we moved heaven and earth. That's what we do. That's what we do at the Balmoral Hotel. We just look at being silly. But heaven and earth. The point about heaven and earth is to say it will happen no matter what. This is my point here. It will happen. There cannot be this kind of behavior. There cannot be these bands of rapey men in the world. I don't know what we have to do with them. I'm not really in favor of rounding people up and wiping them out. I'm not in favor of that. I think their culture will die out and disappear. But at the moment, their culture is being fostered, encouraged, and inflated. And we need to move heaven and earth to make sure that consent and freedom and liberty and this Magdalene Act are enforced. If conservatives have religious freedom not to choose to use contraception, family planning, or abortion, this is protected under the First Amendment. Why is the right of every woman in the USA not also already protected to make that choice herself as a religious matter? I would argue that any and all attempts to curtail or place barriers between mothers and their choices should be deemed breaches of the Constitution. Any attempts to remove women's rights should be met with full federal response on the state level. Women are not your farm animals or slaves or choir boys. Well, that's quite provocative. Don't you think it's a bit provocative, Mr. Dunn? No, I'm trying to be provocative. The point about being provocative here, look, I'm not being funny, but as I pointed out, they're seriously at the moment arguing that the religious preferences of certain individuals in the community get to override the religious preferences of others. This is in and of itself a violation of the Constitution. The Constitution was written to prevent exactly this kind of thing. The Constitution is toilet paper in the United States at the moment. It is. People who in the United States are hollering and clanging and banging for Christianity in the state, they are anti-American. That's the most un-American thing you could do. There is nothing more un-American, I think, than that. Here I've got up here, mostly this will be coming from the church. The church is taking Americans with good American values and turning them inside out and weaponizing stupid nonsense against one another. This is the total abolition of rape in all forms, and that would include the kind of churchy removal of liberties, the removal of rights, removal of the liberty to choose when the when life begins, and that is a decision that I think can only be considered one of a religious basis. And why it shouldn't be protected under the Constitution, I do not know. So the Magdalene Act, if it were applied in the United States of America, it would be enforcing to that. It would not, as I say, although I've got a written constitution here that I've come up with this that governs me, the candidate, and the people that vote for me, and hopefully will grow into more candidates and more voters and so on and so on and so on. My point is that in America, what do you do with this thing? Are they going to have to amend their constitution? They're going to have to take on an epoch nova. They're going to have a whole new revival in that. I don't think so. I think if they just had lawyers with enough teeth and savvy and clarity of judges and justice minded people. But the trouble is, of course, like our justice here in the UK, their justice is rather and utterly broken, isn't it? So that's why we're having this discussion. Well, I guess that's what keeps us all in business, doesn't it? I guess. I mean, At least there's a market now for women that have been completely disadvantaged and disenfranchised and totally removed from their American rights. And here, women here in this country, they haven't quite had that violation, but they are cooking it up in the books as we speak at the moment. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Yep. And churchy people can never be anything other than fascists. I'm afraid church people genuinely think that they are the chosen people all the time. They have some special access to God that the rest of us that are not in on their thing don't do. There is very few things I can point to in the world that are more clearly fascistic than organized religions. And look at what they do to women. A raft of draconian measures to be put forward in this act and introduced via epoch nova candidates in any democracy, traditionally enforced until better methods are devised. Radical policies such as mass taser deployment. Taser deployment? Who are you going to deploy a taser on? Well, any rapey buggers, certainly that's what they're going to do. What do you think we do with a taser? Was this as a taser, right? That's radical. That's mad. I mean, what are you talking about? Dishing out tasers in the country for what? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Are you mad? Well, I don't know, maybe, but I'm going to ask the public if they're up for it. I'm up for it. I think that there should be, a taser is a non-lethal weapon, right? It is a disabling weapon. It is the perfect anti-rape device, as far as I can tell. Yes, I think that people should be able to defend themselves. I would devise a taser that was so high tech that dodgy deployments would result in great penalty. It would be a great deterrent to use the thing unless it was absolutely necessary. But when necessary, be used. Prevent rapes from coming about, deal with rapes when they do happen very effectively, guarantee prosecutions. These are the kind of things you need to do with this act, right? Lots and lots on this that act to get on with the taser. Come on, keep going. All right, okay. Deployment in consideration, fundamentally, the task is incomplete until no children are being harmed in institutions, no women are being harassed at work, and all non consensual sexual and reproductive activity towards adults and children must occur. The rights of mothers, fathers, and children to be together, protected from harm if these liberties are assaulted or violated, it produces lifelong harm and intergenerational harm, affecting whole communities, prosperity, and is a great unspoken cause of suicide and disease. It's a very good point, actually. I know, thanks, mate. These things go on quietly, taboo, and then they don't get dealt with, and it causes great suffering. What else you got there? Keep going. There's something else there that's quite juicy. Go and have a look at that other column. Resistance is not futile. Futile, not futile. They're not the bulb, not futile. It's to keep going up against them. Yes, I get that. The rape culture. The rape culture. Sex positivity is essential. Ooh, sex positivity. Is that what you mean? Mm-hmm. Keep reading. It is essential in the sex phobic and the megachurch closet. Look, we find out where deviance is, and it is not in the brothels or the sex clubs or the kink clubs, even. Good lord, Ian. It is behind the pulpit and under the news anchor desk. Oh dear. This is a BBC joke there, I think. It's a BBC, not very well veiled BBC joke. Behind the pulpit, indeed, okay. Denialists of sexuality and normal human reproductive behavior in favor of the celibate and the holy. Okay, so denialists of church people are weird, is what you're saying. Church people are weird. I am saying that, yes. Church people are weird. But more importantly, keep going. This is where the predators lurk for their prey. Sexually confident women, mature women, this is all right, are safer from this type of harm. You're sure about that? That's quite an assertion. I mean, I don't know for sure, man. I'm just putting forward, so I'm told. Look, man, I'm just going to put out what I think, okay, as a politician, and see if people vote for it, see if people agree with it, whatever. Even if people, the thing about it, great artists are often they put their stuff out, like Sinead O'Connor, she put her stuff out, and people hated it, right? And they just use boo from people like that. I am okay with being booed and all that. So a lot of this is like, this is going to cause a lot of ripples and bother people, but I don't really. I feel there's an obligation to speak about these things. Right, okay. I imagine this is why the basic human instinct to call the cops when you know something's wrong is a good one. What we need to do is ensure whoever takes such calls isn't who they are at present. Active participants in rape cover ups or pursuing through the white collar crime bill. Okay, institutions. I get it. You're sort of repeating yourself quite a bit here. Liberty of women and liberty of economics. Even self defense. Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff here. This is quite gender bending. Whole thing. Man, that's the whole point. That's what we're here for, right? Okay, will we move on? Yes, let's sex positively move on, shall we? What else is going to happen next? Right, basic man. This is another bold idea, I would have to say. Speaking of bold ideas, PR department here. Like this is an hour you've done here, and don't think. Why don't you just wrap up and take a part two, do a part one, part two of the gender justice saga? Is it a saga if it's only two episodes? No, I think it's just a sequel. Just a sequel. But there's, if anything, yeah. Well, part one is a trailer for part two, then, isn't it? If you look at your statistics, unfortunately, Geo, part ones are doing a lot better than your part twos. Now, the trouble with that is that that means maybe people are looking at your work and thinking, this is nuts. What am I even giving this my attention for? Fair dues, fair dues. Yeah, I think so. Well, in that case, let me just try and plug part two, because this really, yeah, we've just done an introduction to me and my politics and all the rest of it. We're going to pick up in part two with the every Frodo needs a Sam and a Gandalf thing, right? Which is kind of about male rescue. Calm down, keep the male victimhood violence on standby. There might be a little bit of that, so if that makes you barf, beware. This comes with a barf warning. I'm sorry about that, but the trouble is that as an independent politician, I concern myself with all minorities, and I mean, really, like it's just a fact of life that there is this appalling suicide rate. So those who are interested in male suicide, why is there male suicide? What things could be done about that in some context? What kind of talking I can offer on that with my experience? That will open part two shortly. If you'd like to cut to that shit in a moment. And also this thing. What's this thing with the hot chicks with the guns? I'm quite interested in hot chicks and guns and a cowboy thing. What's going on there? Well, mate, as we've discussed in previous episodes, previous entertainment features by the Manchurian Candidate, I, Ian F. Dunn, are working on a sci-fi dystopian screenplay comic book thing for I think called Pink Panthers. But it really, although I've got a brand for it, Pink Panthers and Revenge is a Bitch, like I've got a brand for it, kind of going down in a dystopian Mojave Desert type space in America. I don't know why, but like that's where I'm opening mine, so it kind of has that vibe to it. But really, like I'm not taking any ownership of like the Pink Panthers, like the idea. You know, what is the Pink Panthers? Because I mean, I'm a dude, as we've discussed. So really, surely the whole world has to have access to the idea of what would so where the Black Panthers were a racial justice, a civil rights movement. What about a Pink Panthers that was a gender's rights, justice for gender type issues across the spectrum? How would that evolve? How would it come about? And I've got a kind of dystopian future kind of plot line lined out. A bit of a. I've tried to sort of do something akin to what Roddenberry has done. But mine is a kind of dystopia utopia plot, you know. Again, just it's like, well, it's a mixture in it. It's like if you're going to do something of a kind of Asimov level, try and do something, or a kind of Atwood level. Forgive me. I hope to God she would like it and not hate it. That would be the thing. That would be the only real goal. If like some of the really cool feminists, proper feminists, were like, nah, this is quite cool. Like, you know, they didn't at least hate and go, this is appalling, you horrible, run away, you pathetic male species, you garbage DNA receptacle, go away. I don't know. I would hope not. But we're in dark times, aren't we? And there is like gender hatred. I mean, the point, the whole the silliness, forgive the silliness on the serious subject and forgive the kind of, you know, jokiness about horrific stuff. Like, the only way I know how to cope with it is with a little bit of humor, reality and humor. I don't know, guys. Coping strategy of mine. Forgive me. I hope it doesn't offend anyone. No ill intent meant. But the no ill intent meant aspect of Pink Panthers to try and teach about atrocities that have happened, that do happen, that are continuing to happen to women all over the world, continue to be a part of real life. All these plots about second class citizenships and Martian uprisings and whatever it might be because of colonial division. Look, there's this absolute open goal of a plot line there because technology is definitely going to make. I think, I don't know if it already has. I may already have done, but it couldn't be really too far away that there will just be no requirement for human mating to occur in a traditional sense, right? So it's problematic, is it not? It's fascinating, deeply fascinating. You get to do kind of dirty comedy, you get to do kind of horror, you get to do kind of thought politics with it, and you get to do kind of. I'm going for a kind of spy vibe and then a kind of Tarantino vibe, right? A real Tarantino gore vibe, because I'll leave the audience with this for part one at the end of part one, and it's been a bit of a fiasco in it. We'll try to be a little bit more serious in part two. I've introduced you to the main policies, right? The main proposal policies are to do with completely and totally abolishing all non-consensual rape-like assaults. Okay, I think the terminology need to be kind of, you know, a little bit of you know, room to breathe on what we're talking about, but making sure these things that cause harm to people, that are an injury to people, that cause lifelong harm to people, that go on to children, particularly in a near unchallenged way because of all kinds of bonkers gender nonsense, and there are an infinite amount of extremely serious plots. And I would say, like, artistically speaking, surely artistically speaking, we can recognize there is demand for plot that's very grounded in brutal reality. Unfortunately, these are dark topics, but they're also just reality. So the more you make art reflect reality, the more we all get to cope with our trauma and our horror and deal with it healthily and process it and move on and don't act out in reality and don't reoffend in cases of people who are reoffending, or don't kind of become disturbed and alone and suicidal and whatnot. And just a wee reminder while we're here, I'll put this on this thing before I hang up. We'll close this one. 116123 for the amazing Samaritans. Should you be feeling in such a way, it's not. It's not your fault what's going on. You have to remember you're just one wee soul in a big army of usually fucking idiots. You might be surrounded by monsters and assholes. Don't think that you're an asshole. Maybe you're surrounded by them. Okay, and hang in there, get through it. 116123, and even if you don't, if you choose not to, remember that you know, this is your life, this is your choice, and you have to be respected, I think. And that is what consent is. Consent is like a basic form of human respect, for God's sake. Is it too much to ask, really? So in part two, we're going to talk about tasers and stuff. All right. Yeah, let's get serious, man. I don't look. The girls in the comic book are going to do some horrific violence, are going to exact some horrifying revenge on their abusers in these fantasies, because it is a healthy outlet and it makes one less prone to doing anything in reality. So I don't have all the answers, guys, but I'm trying to offer the liberal one because it makes logical sense a lot of the time. And evidentially speaking, it seems to also be quite effective. So we can see progress through time occurring. We can see progress through modernism, through enlightenment, through wokeism. I am pro woke. Like, I mean, you're not going to insult me by calling me woke. I'm literally, if you can find someone more woke on the whole face of the planet, send them to me for a debate so that I can learn from them. Okay? Thanks very much. Let's go to part two, guys.